So tonight we'll study, as we say in Yiddish, verschiedene different pieces from Shavuos, Chag HaShavuos. So first, I wanted to cover here from Agyoni Halacha, page 321, which should be the first page that you have, on the Aseres HaDibros. Now, the truth is that we read Aseres HaDibros twice during the year, once in Parshas Yisro and another time in Parshas Vayeschanan. So this reading on Chag HaShavuos is number 3. However, what we want to think about is that maybe this Kriya on Shavuos is different, has different halachos, and it's a fundamentally different type of Kriya. And why would we come to such a conclusion? And the answer to that you'll see on page 322. And that is that there are two ways of reading the Aseres HaDibros, which is made up of 13 psukim. One is called the Tam Elyon. And if you look at the Tamei HaMikra, you'll always notice that the Tamim are on top. So therefore it's called Tamei Elyon. And that would divide up the Kriya into 13 different psukim. However, there is something called a Tam Tachton. And according to Tam Tachton, we're not going to break up the Kriya into 13 psukim, but rather we're going to break it up into dibros. And each dibra is going to be one pasuk, meaning one continuous reading. So, for example, if you take a look at the second of the Aseres HaDibros, which is Lo Yilecha Elohim Achirim Al Panai, you'll notice that there are no less than 4 psukim. So in Tam Tachton, we're going to read all those 4 psukim together. Or, for example, Lo Tirtzach, Lo Sinaf, Lo Signov are divided up into different readings, even though they might be part of one pasuk, because each one is a separate dibra. And the reason for this is because the kriya of the Aseres HaDibros on Shavuos is fundamentally different than it is on, let's say, Parshas Yisro or Parshas Vayeschanan. Those two kriyos during the course of the year are classic kriyos. And when we want to understand the logic of the Torah, we want to read the Torah and understand it, we got to break it down into psukim. And as we said before, we have here in the Aseres HaDibros no less than 13 psukim. But not so in the case of the reading of Aseres HaDibros on Shavuos. It has a different halacha and a different purpose. And what's that going to be? We are commemorating Matan Torah and the giving of the Aseres HaDibros. So take, for example, you'll see here in these pages that there was a question that was asked to the Rambam. And the question was that apparently some people were standing up for the Aseres HaDibros 3 times a year. And the Rambam was absolutely opposed to it. And why is that?
Differentiates the rest of the Torah. So
correct. And people might get the mistaken impression that the Torah is really the Aseres HaDibros. Everything else is like Idach Pirusha Zil Gemara. It's like secondary.
And we also stand at the end of every sefer.
Right, but we don't stand for the reading. We really stand for Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek. Here we're standing for the actual reading, and it's if we are specifying these 13 psukim that make up Aseres HaDibros as being worthy of our standing, as if to say the rest of the Torah doesn't really deserve that because the special status of Aseres HaDibros.
So when there's a minhag, I think, that people stand then for the whole aliyah. You get the psukim before, maybe and after.
Right.
Does that solve that according to the Rambam? Or should it say no, because now this aliyah is more important than the rest of the year?
Right. The Rambam is still not happy with it.
Mm-hmm.
And
no matter what you stand for, unless you stand for the entire Sefer Torah, that's going to give an assumption that whatever you're standing for is more important.
Correct. And therefore the Rambam doesn't want that. Either stand for everything or don't stand for anything. But, to choose. And actually the Rambam quotes a Gemara at the end of the first parak of Brachos. There apparently was a minhag to stand for Kriyat Shema and to read Kriyat Shema a second time at the end of davening. and there was also a minhag to recite the Yud Gimel Mido, the Yud Gimel Ikrim, and so forth. The Rambam was opposed to all of this because the Gemara says that the Tzdukim were the ones who put the emphasis on these kind of readings, and the Rambam therefore says we shouldn't do it. So if you take a look here on, okay, we don't have to see it inside, but he says that you don't have 324, right? I couldn't photocopy everything.
Okay, I have yours.
Yeah, you want to just take a picture of 324, and I'll read it as you photograph it. He says the Rambam in Tshuva was opposed to this minhag of standing for Kriyas HaTorah, and the Rambam writes because it could lead to a hefsed, a loss in our emunah, in our faith. How so? So he quotes the Gemara Brachos on Daf Yud Beis, and the Gemara says that b'migdash hayu hakohanim korim aseres hadibros b'chol yom. In the Beis Hamikdash, there was a minhag, we don't know about this, to read the aseres hadibros on a daily basis, and the Chachamim got rid of it. Why? Mipnei tarumos haminim, which means that. And again, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but technically we're talking about the early Christians, and they had a claim that the Aseres HaDibros are very special, and the Torah is really reduced to the Aseres HaDibros. And they were given support by the fact that they would read a separate Kriya daily in the Beis HaMikdash of Aseres HaDibros. And the Gemara says they had to be Mavatal. So the Rambam says that therefore, if we stand for the Aseres HaDibros, and we're giving a certain HaShavuos, a significance, to the Aseres HaDibros above and beyond the rest of the Torah, then he says that could be a Piskon Pela Minim, and people would think again that Aseres HaDibros has a special status. Now, in this article, he quotes Rav Soloveitchik. He says, Mosrim Mishem Hagon Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, and in the bottom he has Mesorah, which is a journal that's put out by the OU, and apparently the Rav said the following: there's a fundamental difference between the reading of Aseres HaDibros the whole year round, meaning Yisro and Vaschanan, as opposed to the reading of Aseres HaDibros on Shavuos. He says the following: that the mitzvah of reading the Torah the whole year round, including the Aseres HaDibros twice, is a mitzvah of Talmud Torah, the study of Torah. And with regard to the study of Torah, we have a principle called Kol Psuka de lo Paski Moshe Nan lo Paskinan, which is a Gemara Masechta Megillah. It means we cannot divvy up the psukim in a way that alters from Moshe Rabbeinu. We can't split a pasuk in half. So therefore, we must read the psukim of Aseres HaDibros as such, as 13 psukim. But the Rav says that Aseres HaDibros on Shavuos is something totally different. And we're going to read it with a different time. Right? And the reason for that, Shalom Aleichem, is because we're not reading it as Talmud Torah, but rather we're reading it as Dibros. In other words, we want to make a zecher to remind ourselves and remember the Ma'amad Har Sinai. And if we're just repeating Ma'amad Har Sinai, then at Ma'amad Har Sinai it was given as separate Dibros. And therefore, the Rav Yaakov Emden, in his famous siddur, he writes, Yikra Aseres HaDibros on Shavuos B'tam Elyon. So I made a mistake before. I think I switched between Elyon and Taftan. I always make that mistake. But Tam Elyon means that you're reading it as Dibros, not as Psukim. So it's a whole different division of the Aseres HaDibros in the way we read it. And he says that Yechavin Bishmiyasan, while he's listening to Aseres HaDibros, he should have kavana ki'ilu omed ata eitzel Har Sinai. It's as if he's standing in front of Har Sinai. V'shoma mipi Hashem u'Moshe Avda. And therefore, he says, Rav Soloveitchik, we could justify the minhag of standing for the kriya of Aseres HaDibros on Shavuos, even if he sits the rest of the year, including the two parshiyos that we read in Aseres HaDibros. Why? Because with regard to Ma'amad Har Sinai, we stood at Maimon Har Sinai. So we're just duplicating what they did at Har Sinai by standing. And not only that, no one can confuse this Kriya with the Kriya of Talmud Torah, because the Kriya of Talmud Torah requires psukim. And our Kriya on Shavuos is going to be divros with a Tam Elyon and not psukim. So that itself will convey the message to people that this Kriya is not because this part of Torah is different and unique and has more kedusha than the rest of the Torah, but rather that we are duplicating, or shall we say replicating, Maimon Har Sinai. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about Erev Tavshilin. I have the pages over there from this book, which is called Guidelines. You familiar with this book?
Yeah, actually, I think I have it.
You have it.
Okay.
So he says the following. When Yontif is on Friday, like for example, this Yontif, one is required to prepare food before Yontif, especially for Shabbos. So in other words, you're not allowed to do work on Yontif for Shabbos. So you have to prepare everything before Yontif. So therefore, it's forbidden to make any preparations on Yontif for another day, even on Shabbos. So what do? We begin to prepare for Shabbos before Yontif, and then we're allowed to finish the preparations on Yontif. And how do we accomplish this? Through an Erev Tavshilin. So as a result of setting up an Erev Tavshilin, we'll see exactly how to make an Erev Tavshilin. Then we can allow cooking, grinding, sorting. You could heat up food. All this can be done on Yontif for the sake of Shabbos. And that's because we consider as if he's continuing the work that he started on Erev Yontif on Yontif itself. Now, who is obligated in Erev Tavshilin? The mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin is incumbent upon every individual. The head of the household is going to set up the Erev on behalf of the entire family. Now, if somebody is a guest in your house, is he included in the host's Erev? Does he have to make his own Erev? That's a discussion here on the second page, number 36. And basically, he comes to the conclusion that each person should make his own Erev, even though he's a guest at someone's house. Okay, but that has to be studied.
Would I be obligated to my own sukkah or make kinyan on something like that? Why would that be different?
I think he's saying that the Erev Tavshilin was an obligation on the bias. And if you're not part of the bias, even though right now you're a guest in the house, but you're not really a member of the bias, therefore you need your own Erev Tavshilin. Okay, but Lamaisa, he tells you to consult your Orthodox rabbi. All right.
I never heard that. Would that be someone's not even know if they're sleeping over, just coming for a meal, a lunch?
No. In that case, everybody agrees he has to make his own Erev Tavshilin. He's talking about a case of someone who's going to be with his host for the entire.
I'm coming for Yontif and Shabbos.
And I'm staying for Shabbos as well.
Wow.
So what is the Erev Tavshilin? This is on page 31. V'hadein eruva yehishara lanu lafuye lavashule latmune ladluke shraga lafuke ulameved kol tzarchana miyontif l'Shabbos. And we should say it in English if we don't understand the Aramaic. By means of these Erev foods, we will be permitted to bake, cook, keep foods warm, light candles, carry, and do all that we need on Yontif for Shabbos. Now he says that when you're reciting the bracha over the Erev Tavshilin and the declaration of the Erev, you should be holding on to the Erev Tavshilin foods. If he forgot, then that's okay. Maybe he should pick it up again and again recite the declaration, but certainly not to make another bracha. He was Yotzei, even if he didn't hold on to the foods. Now, what about the case of a person who accidentally did not set up an Erev? If it's not yet nightfall, going into Yontif, then he can still do an Erev Tavshilin. However, if it's already Yontif, then he has to rely on the Rav of the city who will have him in mind. Again, that's not a perfect situation. He says it's advisable to set up notices in shuls to remind people to perform this mitzvah. Now, does he have the bracha here? Oh, here he has the bracha on the bottom of page 30. Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu mitzvosav v'tzivanu al mitzvahs eruv. Okay, what foods does he require for an eruv? This is on page 33. A cooked food and a baked food. Alvit b'shmona v'chetzi. Anachnu nitpalam. Okay. He says the minhag is to take meat, poultry, fish, or an egg. I think that's our minhag, to take an egg, and a whole matzah as far as a baked food. So you have a cooked food, which is the egg, and you have a baked food, which is the matzah.
Why not a roll? Like a color roll or something?
Roll's fine, sure.
Why do we all do matzahs?
Yeah, we all do matzahs.
I don't know why.
Hold on.
I'll tell you why, because some of us are not so careful about eating it. You'll see that we're supposed to eat the Erev
Yeah.
Tavshilin on Shabbos.
Yeah, Sunday morning. Oh,
Right.
it's in the fridge.
Right, right.
Right.
Go figure out where it is in the fridge. That itself. Baruch Hashem, our fridges are so packed. He says it's also permitted to use a roasted, pickled, fried, or smoked food instead of a cooked food. Okay, fine. Why do we take two types of food? And he says taking a cooked food begins the cooking preparations. Taking a baked food begins the baking preparations. Now, if a person did not take a cooked food, the Erev is invalid. And therefore baking as well as cooking for Shabbos is prohibited. So what I'm going to ask you to do here, he has another 3 or 4 pages. Maybe look it over, if you don't mind. What page number is there on the left? Number 34. 34. Look over, just skim it over and tell me, which paragraphs interest you or you think are relevant. In the meantime, we're going to go on here to page 413. Or maybe we have something before that. We have 411 there in the photograph.
411 here as
Oh,
well.
very good. So we'll take a look at 411. Some of the page numbers didn't come out. That's why it's important to keep it in line, in order. So let me talk to you a little bit about the minhag to eat milchiks. Now, in Halacha, it says that on a yontif, you're supposed to eat 2 meat meals, one at night and one during the day. And by the way, that's true even for Chol HaMoed. In the case of Shavuos, we have a unique problem. And this touches on the kashrus discussions that we had a month ago. And that is, we want to mekayim 2 mitzvahs, so to speak. The real mitzvah of Simchas Yontiv ain't Simcha ela b'basar, and you need meat for that. On the other hand, this minhag of eating milchiks. Now, where does the minhag originate from? According to most, it originates from the fact that at Har Sinai, when the Easter of Nevela came into being, then almost all the food that they had that was fleishiks was nevela. So they didn't have time to chef animals and prepare meat. So instead they ate milchiks. And we want to commemorate the eating of milchiks, so we eat milchiks. And as you know, people love to have a good balins and so forth and so on, cheese balins. But now we have a problem because if you want to have a meat meal, first of all, you can't have the meat meal first and then the milchik meal, because then you have to wait 6 hours. Which theoretically you could do, and then you could eat the balinces at, let's say, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the evening. However, the other option would be to have your milchika meal first, and then go into your fleishika meal. But the problem is that although you're allowed to eat meat after milk, there are a couple of requirements that have to be fulfilled, if you remember. First of all, we need kinuach hapeh. So you have to rinse out your mouth. According to some poskim, you have to take a piece of bread and bite into it, so that you remove any particles. And then you have to wash your hands carefully. And some say you even have to wait a minimum amount of time, a half hour. But now we have another problem. And that is that our minhag is not to eat milchiks and fleishiks in the same meal, which would mean that we have to end the milchik meal and then, and only then, begin the fleishik meal. But now we have another problem, and that's called a bracha she'eina tzricha, which means that to set it up l'chatchila, that you have really, in effect, one long meal, but you're going to make all these extra brachas. So you're going to have Birkas HaMazon for the first meal, you're going to have Netilas Yadayim and Hamotzi for the second meal, and then Birkas HaMazon for the second meal. So some say that you should make sure you have a break. Finish the meal with milchiks, bench, and go out for a walk.
Does that have to be a meal? milchiks or
I think it should be a meal. Why? Because the minig is to integrate milchiks into a sudas yontif, not just to stam take a milchiks.
Well, because if it's just commemoration, I'm thinking so Mishum Simchas Yontif regularly. So that's where you have your Suda, so you have Basar.
Right.
But Mishum the Minhag to remind ourselves what happened. So have an ice cream sandwich or whatever.
Right. I think I'm pretty sure. I don't have it here, unfortunately, in this, and I don't know if they put out one of those for Shavuos. I couldn't find one in my collection. Maybe there is one.
In the case of Kufar, or people who are here or only 2 days, second day Yontif, you're not going to have, if it's on Shabbos, you're not going to have that dairy meal probably after your fledgling meal, before your fledgling meal.
On the second day
Second
Yontif.
Yontif.
I know this the Yotze the minute by having one
Just 1 day?
one meal for 1 day. I see. That's good news. Okay, what I want to talk to you about now is the concept of Nasev and Nishma. So on page 411 in the Hagyoni Aloha, he quotes the Beis Halevi. I'm going to say over the Beis Halevi very quickly, and we have to leave in about 5 minutes, so please remind me, meaning because they have a shir here. Mm-hmm. And the Beis Halevi asks the following question. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Mechira that you cannot commit yourself to what's called a davar shein lo kitzvah. So HaShavuos on a davar shein lo kitzvah, which means I obligate myself to support you for X number of years, but who knows what that obligation entails? What kind of needs will you have, in terms of a house and food and clothing, whatever it might be. So that's called a davar shein lo kitzvah, and there's no such thing as a HaShavuos that's binding. If I take it upon myself to commit myself to davar shein lo kitzvah, and therefore the Beis Halevi asks the obvious question: what's Nasev and Nishma? It's supposed to be a HaShavuos, and yet we have no clue what is included in that HaShavuos. So the Beis Halevi goes with his mahalach. We want to study the Chida's mahalach, but the Beis Halevi's mahalach is that there is one kinyan in the constellation of kinyanim that operates and is valid even on a davar shein lo kitzvah, and that's a kinyan avdus, which means that if a person makes himself into an eved and he's makna his guf as an eved, that's an unlimited and unrestricted HaShavuos, but it's not HaShavuos at all. It's a kinyan on his guf. Once his guf is kani to the adon, memeli is chayav and everything. But the Chidah has another approach. Maybe we should go into the Beis Medrash.
Yeah.
Let's go into the Beis Medrash. So, are they finished with Myra?
No, they're not done yet.
So let's wait. Hope because I think the Daf Yomi officially starts after Myra.
Yeah.
So they told me 8:40, but maybe they'll finish a little earlier or later. So if you take a look at the bottom of page 411, you'll see he quotes the Chidah. The Chidah lived in Turkey and in Spanish-speaking countries some 3.5 centuries ago, 300 years ago. And he bases himself on a different Rambam. The Rambam says the following, that Mipnei ma posikim ishto she'ei zones bita chayav lezuna. He asks the following question: if a man at the time of marriage gets married to a second marriage, and his second wife, let's say, or it might be a first marriage for him, but for her, she brings in a daughter into the marriage, and she expects him to obligate himself to support his stepdaughter, what we would call. And the Rambam says that if he accepted it upon himself, he's obligated. And the question is obvious: it's a davar shein lo kitzvah. So the Rambam answers, "Mitneisha posak b'shas nisui ve'havi davar sheniknim ba'amira." There's a new concept called a kinyan through amira. What does that mean? That if we make an agreement, a verbal agreement, and then we go ahead and we do an action like nisuin, which means that she married him and he married her based on this verbal commitment that he would support her daughter, then the nisuin itself clinches the marriage. What does this have to do with Shavuos? So the Chidah quotes a Gemara in Masechta Ksubos on Daf Kuf Beis, and the Gemara says that when two mechutanim get together and they agree he'll support the son and the daughter, the son and his daughter-in-law, and the other one will support. Then, if they made a kiddushin based on that agreement, then that's called dvar ma'niknim b'amira. Says the Chidah that Ma'aber Har Sinai is a marriage. And how does he know this? From a Mechilta. The Mechilta says that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu came from Sinai, he was a chasen hayotze l'kras hakal. Okay, so we'll just take a break for a minute here and try to get reestablished here. Okay, so the Chidah wants to say that Har Sinai is a marriage. And that marriage is based on what we call the Har. The mountain itself became like a chuppah over Klal Yisrael. And if you take a look at the language of the Mechilta, which is in the footnote quoted here, number 14 on page 412, he says, El Hashem misinai ba lekabel es Yisrael kechasan sheyotze l'kas hakal. And that's all of Shir Shirim is this metaphor that we are the Kala and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Chassan. And that marriage was clinched at the time of Har Sinai. In fact, the Luchos was really the Kesef Kiddushin. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought the Luchos down, gave it to Moshe. Moshe was the Shliach that accepted it on behalf of Klal Yisrael. And this is a kind of marriage that doesn't lend itself to divorce. So even though the Christians say that, Chas v'shalom, we were rejected.
What happens if a man is not this woman, he can't divorce her. So having the chuppah over her head is like, right?
Kafalem
Is like kilo being forced.
But do you see what the Chidah
stray? So it's big God can never divorce the months either.
Do you see what the Chidah's point is? He takes this halacha of hein advar ma'niknim be'amira, and he applies it to our Nasa v'nishma. When we recite Nasa v'nishma, God is saying, you know what? I'm going to take you as my chassan, as my kala, because you made that commitment to fulfill my will and all the Tariq mitzvahs. And our commitment now becomes binding because HaKadosh Baruch Hu went through with the marriage based on our commitment. So we can make a kinyan of hein advar ma'niknim b'amir. Okay, so I thought that was pretty important. Okay, what else? So we discussed Erev Tavshil, and we spoke about Simchas Yontiv and Basar, and we spoke about the minig of milchus and how to separate that. Fine. Then we spoke about the Aseret Dibros, Ba'amida Ubetam Elyon, and that's going to be a fundamentally different kriya of the Aseret Dibros than the rest of the year, because now it's not Talmud Torah that's motivating us, but rather Seicha L'Kabal Satorah. Okay. Now, in the yeshiva world, if you're familiar with it, on the days before Shavuos, we try to study the laws of Talmud Torah. Some study the laws of Birchas HaTorah. There are a lot of complicated issues if you're up the whole night. But I wanted to talk to you about the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. And I want to give you this page, which has two sides to it. We're not going to go through the whole thing. Don't get nervous. I just want to make like 1 or 2 points here. Okay. And if you'd like to go through it on your own, we'll have
all night to do it.
Right. You'll have all night to do it. Yeah, there's a pasuk that speaks about what's called Torah Hashem and Toraso. And the pasuk says, Ki im b'Torah Hashem chefto, u'b'Toraso yeg. Torah Hashem in the Reisha, and in the Sefer it says Torah so. And the Gemara Kiddush on Daf Lamed Beis analyzes the question about whether or not a Talmid Chacham who knows Torah could be mochel on his kavod. We have to have a chiv kavod towards the Talmid Chacham. What if he's mochel on his kavod? And the Gemara establishes the following. It all depends whether it's Torah delay, it's his Torah, as the pasuk says, b'Toraso yegeh, or it's Torah Hashem. If he's representing, he's the embodiment of Torah Hashem, then he doesn't have bailus to be mochel on his covenant because it's Hashem's Torah. It's only after he makes that Torah into his Torah, now he can be mochel. It's Torah delayed. So Rashi says the following. The key word is yege. B'tchila, before he gets to the level of yege, then it's called Torah Hashem. But mishalomda v'garsa, when he studies the Torah and he knows it well, then it becomes Torah. So this is a fascinating question that comes up in the poskim about whether or not a Talmud Chacham can be mocha on his kavah. So, for example, the Steichem, it talks about a Baal Shmuos, a person who knows, he knows Shas, and the Birkei Yosef speaks about a person who's Shona Halachos, he knows all of the halacha, and in both cases, the poskim says he cannot be mocha on his kavah. Why? Because it's Torah Hashem. So, at what point does it become Torah so? So if you go through the sources here, I'm just going to give you like the tip of the iceberg. He says the following: as long as you're learning the Yedias HaTorah, you're acquiring the knowledge of the Torah, and you're studying at your Rebbe's footstep, at your Rebbe's feet, then it's still Torah. At what point Torah Hashem, at what point does it become Yege, and it's Torah so, and he can be mochel on his covered? That's only when not only has he learned all this material, and not only does he have shlita, does he have how shall I say it in English, a handle on the entire Torah, but more than that, he's now able to compare things in the Torah one to the other, ask questions, give answers, be machadish chidushim, and be morenu hora. Then it becomes Torah because of the yeged. So in Mirz Hashem, we're entering into Kabbalah HaTorah. Again, I have an old article here in the same sefer about how every year we all accept the Torah again anew, and there's a new Kabbalah HaTorah. It's interesting how he proves this, but therefore our Kabbalah HaTorah should be a Kabbalah HaTorah that we should have a vision, we should have a motivation to want to get to the level of Torah delay, of Torah, not just to acquire knowledge, but to have such a control and a kinyan on the Torah that we can compare one thing to the other, make analogies, ask questions, come up with answers and new insights. He wrote on it to be his will that we can hopefully have aspirations for that level of Torah.
Amen.
Okay there? Amen.
Right.
So I'll leave you with these pages. I don't need any of the pages back.
Like you're saying,
This safe I'll take back.
It says here, interesting. A person lives in a place where there is no Rav, where the Rav did not include him. What should he do?
Wow. And he didn't make an Erev?
Right.
Don't eat.
It's also for him to prepare Shabbos in the usual way, since he doesn't have Erev Tashil. If he didn't yet cook Yanta, he could put extra food into the pot that could be in on Shabbos. Right? So let's say you have a...
Wait, 1 second. He's cooking now on Yom Tov itself?
Let's say if he didn't yet cook Yom Tov, so then...
But what day of the week are we? On Yom Tov? Oh, so we're on Yom Tov, and he still has to cook for Yom Tov?
So he's on Yom Tov, obviously he didn't cook yet for Shabbos, right?
Right.
So if you still have, you didn't cook yet for Yom Tov, so then you put extra food into the pot to be eaten on Shabbos.
Beautiful. In other words, he's still cooking for Yom Tov, and he's allowed to
the
cook for
leftovers.
Leftover stuff.
Right. I don't know how he's going to have enough for Shabbos, but okay.
Okay.
Hopefully, he doesn't have too many guests on Shabbos.
So you can't cook a pot, especially for Shabbos. I mean, so you shouldn't, in this situation, put up food that won't be ready. You couldn't.
But it's got to be ready before Shabbos.
Exactly.
Because otherwise, you can't fool yourself and say you cooked for Yom Tov.
Okay, and the
Excellent.
other, you may
Thank
give
you so much.
food to another person who's already made an Erev. But this person can make all the preparation that he requires for Shabbos.
Even on behalf of you, and you didn't make an Erev?
Says the details of this should be discussed with a knowledgeable person. If neither of these two options are feasible, and he has nothing else to eat, then he could bake one bread and cook one dish for Shabbos.
That's interesting. I don't know why that's so.
Yeah.
Does he quote the source for that? No.
No.
I don't think. Maybe in the back. Does he have sources in the back? I forget.
It says some sources, but there's no footnotes here to show you where they were built.
Yes, you have to look up on the page or the paragraph or
okay.
something, right? Because I'd be curious to know There must be a sugya somewhere that says that bare minimum you're allowed.
Give you one last one here. Could you light Shabbos lift if you didn't make an Eruv?
I would say no. What does he say? Because he didn't make an error.
People need to prepare for
And then he's
Shabbos.
preparing for
And
Shabbos.
wait.
Unless we say that he's going to be nana from the lights on Yom Tov, maybe.
Says no, since there's anyway electrical illumination.
Right,
it's
that's
not
what I'm
there,
saying. Let's say there was no electricity
And
and he would light a candle and benefit from it on Yom Tov, then he,
And then he similarly makes it report. He can give his candle as a gift to someone else who already, I guess, presumably made an Eruv, and that person lights him on his behalf. Again, precise details of this arrangement should be discussed with the Rav.
oh, in other words, he appoints a shliach,
So if.
but then
Reuven
the
didn't-
shliach is going to have to, who made an error, is going to have to come into your house and light your candles.
Yeah,
And we said before that if you don't have an Arab, somebody else who has an Arab is allowed to cook for you,
and what if
which
Reuven-
itself is a
So
chiddush.
if Reuven doesn't have candle, doesn't have it, so he lights Shimon over, he gives Shimon his candles,
Right.
Shimon lights it for him. But if Shimon doesn't get hanat for it at all, if he's not in the house anymore, is Reuven allowed to?
That's what it seems from the other piece that you read to me before,
With the food,
that somebody could cook for you in your house.
yeah.
He didn't, did he add a stipulation that that person was cooking
No,
for
didn't
you?
have to,
No,
cause that guy's mutter to eat.
right?
Okay. Interesting, the whole.
But why is he says you have to give him your candles?
To give as a gift, yeah,
Why? Let the guy come with his own candles, for my.
maybe, I'm not gonna be medayik in the.
Right, no, I think if,
Sean
he's
say.
pretty medayik.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be,
Like, for example, in Hanukkah, if you're a guest at someone's house, you should be bringing your own candles or
Or-
chip in for the
Right.
oil.
which is what I thought you were gonna say originally, we did with the guest, you said a guest should make his own eruv of shilling.
Right.
So why, if I have my father-in-law, well, that's also kashada, is family considered guest?
Right.
But
But
let's
it
say,
says, I read that the family is not considered. If you eat anything else.
Right. So maybe his father-in-law is not a guest, he's already part of the family. I know you'd have to really
but if I
research
invite,
that.
if I invited a friend over for Yom Tov.
Yeah.
So
Do me a favor, you to write this to me in a WhatsApp or a recording. And believe me, after I finish my shir tomorrow, I'll hopefully have a clear head.
Okay.
Because
Sure.
I have a very heavy shir tomorrow. I don't know if you know Rabbi Tarek, Rabbi Moshe Tarek.
Yeah.
My share,
Yeah, so he asked me to fill in for him tomorrow. He's in South Africa
where, at the yeshiva,
at the yeshiva.
so what are you, a regular Gemara share, or?
The plot that they're learning. And it's fifth year Hester, guys, in Gush.
Oh,
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, thanks. My wife is praying for me.
What are they learning?
All right. Brachos. So that much I looked at a little, but it's a very complicated sugi.
Good job.
Good job.